Welcome to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.
Welcome to another episode of Slackin' Off. I'm your host, Brady Slack, and today's guest is someone that I've known for quite a while. I've worked with this individual for quite a while, but just like we always say, you'll find really quick that even though this is Slackin' Off, we do anything but slack off. And this guest is no exception. Welcome to the show today, Brody Fawcett.
Brady Slack, thanks for having me, dude. Excited to be
Hey,
here and slack
you're
off together.
you're for about an hour we might slack off just a little bit, but you and I both know that we've got plenty to do when we hop off.
I love the name. I think it's awesome.
So you're one that I was excited to have on just because you've got so much going on. We've known each other for a number of years, six, maybe 5, 6 years now. When I worked at the accounting firm that I used to work at, I helped advise a little bit of what was going on, and I worked on some of your guys' files, and then we linked up a little bit later, and we've been working together for a bit. But your landscape has changed a little bit in the time period that we've been working together. You started as a sales rep for
Yeah.
Vivint, and
hmm
then your wife started a killer company, Momale, which is a fitness app for women that
Yep.
slays. I don't know who's the better entrepreneur, you or her, so I won't get into that debate here now. But then
I
you
know.
left Vivint and
Right?
you started real estate investing school. How, like, why? What's the deal with that?
Yeah. Why? So that's the thing. I mean, I was in the door-to-door space for probably close to 8 years collectively.
Yeah.
The last few years I didn't, go out and do the summer grind as much. I was more, managing a few teams from afar, and so the grind wasn't necessarily the same, moving my family out and going through all of it. But I think it's just always been in the cards. I know a lot of people when they leave the space, like it's easy to come up with different excuses or it just wasn't conducive with the family life or this or that or whatever it was. But like I don't have any of that. I think that it served me, it got me to where it needed to get me, but it wasn't going to get me to where I needed to go. And I just remember one day thinking like, man, especially when I started exploring, like, okay, if I could leave and do something else, because at this time it's you get over the learning curve and it stops being a commission based job and it's very predictable. If I work X amount of level or X amount of hours, I'm going to make X amount of dollars. And so, even though it is commission based, you have control over that. And if you want to raise, you can go work harder and put a little bit more energy, effort in. And especially when you start growing a team and you're building residual and equity, it's very comfortable and it's very easy, not easy, but it gets to the point where it becomes easy and you're making a great amount of money for not putting in a lot of effort. And I was definitely at
Yeah.
that place. And so as I talked about like leaving and doing something else, everybody around me was like, dude, you have it so good. Why would you ever leave this? Like you
Really.
have it so good. And I really did. But I just remember thinking on this quote that good is the enemy of great. And because
Mm.
I had it so good, it was holding me back from doing something that was potentially great. And honestly, like I felt that, now going into, I guess, a solid year and a half that I've been off of,
Yeah.
door to door payroll. And it's just proven that 100%, just kind of taking that leap and obviously, being smart with the money I made along the way helped me kind of have that platform to leap off of just through passive income through real estate and being as smart as I could with my money allowed me to go and like take this leap that's definitely paid off. And so glad I did it. Why did I do it? It's just always in the cards, just kind of like a born entrepreneur, I guess.
Now, for you, when you talked about it being in the cards, did you know it was always going to be real estate, or did you figure there might be something else that would come up along the way that you might be interested in?
Um, you know, Real estate, like I kind of fell into it by accident. And even after I bought my first property, it was like a few months before I realized like, oh, this is actually really cool. I'm making money passively. Like this is awesome.
Yeah.
Especially when you compare it to working a job where it's active labor, right? And
Yeah.
so that kind of happened and kind of scaled from there because I've figured out how cool it was and that I wanted to go and build that type of a lifestyle that created more freedom for me and not just like financial freedom, but like location freedom and environment freedom,
Yeah.
and then time freedom as well. Like I think there's more than just financial freedom, and a lot of people can become financially free. But in
Yeah.
fact, we know a lot of people that are financially free, but they're not
Yeah.
time free, right? And we know a lot of people that maybe are time free, the bum on the corner, but definitely isn't financially free or living his most fulfilled life. And
Yeah.
so I think real estate, I just became known for that. What I loved the opportunity of being able to take a little bit of money and using creativity and knowledge and hustle, turn that into a lot of money. And I think it's different and unique than a lot of things out there, that a lot of people think it takes money to make money, and a lot of things it does. But real estate was just something like, no, you can actually go learn and educate yourself, and then you can use a little bit of money and turn that into a lot of money, and it's not getting lucky, it's just understanding what that is. And so I became passionate about that and just started sharing my journey with that because I think it's so cool, more people should know about it. And that eventually just transitioned, and a lot of people looked at me as like a leader in that space and knowing what I was talking about, and it just made sense to start a business in that realm. But as I look back, I think I've always been addicted to this idea of working harder today for an easier tomorrow. And just like whatever I need to do to go like put in the extra work, the extra effort to create more freedom for myself down the road. And so, yeah, I just think it kind of led into that. And I have a few other things going on that pay me as well, aside from just, real estate and my real estate coaching company. But all of it has to do with the same thing. Like, how can I put in hard work now, and it's going to build something and set myself up that it pays me without me having to insert time every single day.
Okay, I've got a couple thoughts, but I want to dive into really quick because it's actually been a recurring conversation or topic that's been brought up within some different groups over the course of the past, even just the past week, is this idea between passive versus active. And I feel like there's a lot of, I'll say it again, there's a lot of financial porn on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, wherever you look, about finding passive income. I I have not found a truly way to make as much money as I do passively without any work on my behalf. But it has become passive as I've moved out of an active role into a different role to start to generate something else. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on versus like the whole passive versus active mentality. Like, have you ever bought a property that is truly passive? You don't have to do anything with it. I've just this is more again. This is selfish for me because I want to learn from you. But tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, what a great question. I have a few thoughts that jump to my mind. The first one, free time isn't freedom. There's a difference in free time and freedom. And to give the analogy of, the homeless person on the corner of the street that has a lot of free time, but they don't have a lot of freedom. And I think that goes hand in hand with, passive income versus active income. And this is what makes me tick. I don't know if it's the same for everybody else or if other people resonate with it, but the reason I love creating passive income so much is it gives me breathing room. It gives me breathing
Yeah.
room. And so I kind of like went through this phase where I figured it out where because for me, I'm 30 years old right now. At the age of 25, I had enough passive income that I was making more than the average person in my county, right? I remember Googling it one day, like, what's the average income? And I'm like, oh, cool. I'm making that passively, right? And so essentially, like, it was covering all my expenses. It was covering, everything I needed to live, not the way I wanted to necessarily, but I could have quote unquote retired if I wanted to, right? And
Yeah.
so and obviously it's not the lifestyle I wanted to live, so that's why you keep growing and building. But like even moving out to Hawaii and doing some of these other things, it's put me in a spot where it's like, okay, well, I don't have to go work today if I don't want to go work today. I don't have to go work this week or this month or like this year, and I can kind of do what I want when I want. But you find out really quick that that's not fulfilling. And so my whole thing is
Yeah.
like I love like actively working because if you can actively work and doing something that's fulfilling, like right now, we remodeled our house out here in Hawaii, and like I've been doing some projects in the backyard, and like it's so fun for me. I was telling my wife, like last night I was at Home Depot and it was like I don't know 10 p.m. at night. I'm like I'm by myself loading all these 2x4s, and I'm like like, I'm thriving. Like, I love this. Just getting my hands dirty, put on some country
Yeah.
music in the backyard and like go to town. It's the best. But the reason I love it so much is because I do not have to do it. I'm doing it because I want to do it. And I think that that's the key right there. And it if you don't have the passive side built up to where you have that passive income coming in and you're only relying on your active income, it doesn't matter what you're doing, even if you love it. If you're doing it because you have to do it, it's not your decision and you end up not
Yeah.
loving it, I promise. But you can do the exact same thing and now you're doing it because it's a decision that you make. And I even remember on the doors, I set a goal. I don't know which year it was, but I wanted to sell over 200 accounts. And I remember I surpassed my goal and it was the most money I'd ever made. I'd hit my goal, still a month left in the summer, so I had some time. And every single day after that, like, I actually sold better because it felt better. And the reason was
Yeah.
because I was going out and doing the job because I wanted to. All of a sudden, I didn't have to go and do it. Like, I'm trying to hit this goal. I have to get this goal. I have to make this money. I have to hit this. I have to hit this. Have this. All of a sudden, I hit it, and I'm like, wow, I'm out here because I'm choosing to be out here. And all of a sudden, I was able to relax. I sold better. I produced better. All of these things. And so, I think it's the same thing with life. Just set yourself up to be in a position where I don't care what you do. If you can do it because you want to, not because you have to, everything changes. And then I guess to answer your question with real estate, is it is it ever passive? I think this is something that a lot of people, yeah, fall victim to is like, oh, it's so passive, it's so passive. I think the first thing to point out and to realize is you can trade, especially early on, your time or you can trade your money, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan, like early on, like I was willing to trade my time for that passive income. Like I'd go hustle, I'd do the manual labor on the properties, fixing stuff up. I'd be the one, boots on the ground, like hustle, 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 because I didn't have as much money. And so I was willing to trade that hustle for money. Well,
Yeah.
now it's a little bit different, right? I'm willing to trade more of my money for less of the hustle because I don't have as much time. Whereas before, I have more money than time. Whereas in the past, I had more time than I did money. And we see it a lot with syndications and funds. Yes, that's the most passive form of investing is like cutting a check and giving it to somebody else.
Yeah. The
But
mailbox money.
mailbox money, yes, but you're not gonna get as good of a return as if you put in a little bit more of the active side of it where you hustled to find the deal, you structured it yourself, you got creative, and then you put some
Yeah.
money into it. So, it's that whole balance, right? Like, the more passive you want it to be, yeah, the probably the less return you're gonna get. The more active you wanna be involved, the better the return you're gonna get.
Cool. Let it be known that you can take Brody out of Utah, but you can't take Brody out of Utah because he would still rather listen to country music than an island jam. That
That's for
is.
sure. Yeah,
Well, so not to get sidetracked or anything, because as I've seen your journey, as I know a lot of the backstories, and some of the listeners may or may not know what that looks like. The 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 progression of your deals have gotten immensely different from when you first started, and I would
absolutely.
say, as it relates to your situation, because I know the situation, you started out in a very active role with your real estate, and it has progressively become more passive as you have changed the portfolio that you operate within, right? And obviously, I think I also very much agree to the fact that you will get more out of it if you put more into it at the beginning, but doing so will allow you to diversify or get into bigger portfolios or bigger projects as you continue to grow, and that has happened with your portfolio. Like, you started out with one house in Cedar City, Utah, that you rented out to some college buddies who were going to college at SUU, right? And then now and we can walk through this, like, this progression, because it would actually be interesting, and I think a lot of people would like to do that. But you started out with this one single family property that you rented out to some buddies who were going to college, and then now you're working on tiny home resorts and multifamily projects and development projects. And that's, I think, the dichotomy, like the progression of that, is pretty interesting, right? That's a
Yeah.
natural progression for a lot of real estate investors. Do you want to talk a little bit about that progression?
Yeah, for sure. And I actually need to do this is go back and probably create like a timeline of all the deals and how they rolled over into other deals. And because it really is, you start to build momentum, and each deal
Yeah.
before becomes like a stepping block for the next one. Especially when we talk about, doing cash out refinances where you're able to pull cash out and keep the property. And then you take that money and you go put that down on a different property that also was building equity and collecting rent from other tenants. And now you have two that are both adding up, right? Where people are paying rent each month. And then you have that extra cash flow that comes in, you save it up for a year, and then that goes a down payment on another property. And you might get a home equity line of credit on that and pull money out of that and roll that into something
Yeah.
else. And so that's kind of been the stepping stones, I would say, to like how I initially got started. Um, just to kind of like, yeah, I guess go back and give a quick summary of it. You said that's how I got started, was kind of rent by the room. Like I said, it was by accident. It wasn't till like all my buddies started paying me rent, and then I was like, "Oh, there's money left over. This is cool." And
Yeah.
so that led to, how do I go replicate this process? And I think one thing that hasn't changed throughout the entire, you know, investing career of mine is, I always want to look at something and say, "Hey, how do I build the most amount of money using the least amount of my own money?" And obviously, like simple math, that's how you get high returns. Little money in, a lot of money out is going to get you the highest ROI. And
Yeah.
so even on these bigger deals, and that's a cool thing too, is like that skill set has compounded as well. Not only has the money compounded, but like the skill set compounds. And so you just get better at it. And it doesn't matter if you put a zero or two zeros or three zeros on the deal. It's initially the same thing where you can use your skill set to go structure a deal, get creative on something, put it all together on paper to where it makes sense, even go get the property under contract, and then pitch somebody else that has the time, has the money and not the time, right? I put in all that time. Now they have the money but not the time, and so they're willing to trade that because they can't go figure out how to invest in real estate and do all the work and, like educate themselves and get creative. That's like, it's easier just to write a check, get a good return, and have somebody else that's more of an expert do that. And so that's kind of stayed the same throughout, all of these different homes that I've bought, even though they're different classifications and different asset classes. And so, yeah, just kind of like recycling my money as much as possible, getting into properties using strategies with low and no money down, like seller financing, like
Yeah.
just power of the primary loans, house hacking. My wife and I, a handful of times, we buy a duplex and rent out the other unit until we reached our year mark and then move out, or we'll do like a live-in flip. We've done that a few times where we'll live in a property, fix it up while we're there, not necessarily make the greatest rental. It doesn't pencil that well, but we built a ton of equity because we were able to do some of the work ourselves, and then we'll sell it, make, if we've been there the last 2 years, having a good tax guy helps you, I shouldn't say avoid capital gains. What do you say? Defer it, defer your taxes. Is that how you?
Eliminate. Let's say eliminate.
Eliminate. Eliminate's a good word. There we go. So just different strategies like that, that's all kind of like gotten to where I'm at now and the stuff I'm doing now. And I would say the biggest thing that's changed, because there's actually probably better returns in like these smaller deals if we're looking at it from like a percentage standpoint, but it just gets
Yeah.
to a point where you're like I said, I have more money than time now. And so I have to be careful because it's not worth all this time to take on a deal, even though the return's higher from a percentage standpoint. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. And so it's kind of forced me to like think bigger and do bigger deals that are more fun and exciting, that are going to actually like
Hmm.
make a dent in my goals and stuff that I want to go do for the future.
I want to highlight one thing that you talked about because I think it's important that people kind of understand how that works. And we've talked about it a couple times with some other guests, but just to kind of reiterate that you taking money out of all of these properties that you've owned is not taxable income to you. You have the opportunity to utilize debt, other people's money, to then go purchase other assets. And this is a very easy way for people to get started in real estate. You can utilize a HELOC or you can utilize a cash out refi to then go and purchase additional assets that are going to that are going to cover the debt service and allow you to continue to build equity in that new asset. Now, part of that question that I want to highlight and get some insight on is, do you invest for equity or do you invest for cash flow?
Mm. Good question. Super good question. So this is another one that like has changed over time a little bit, right?
Yeah,
Like initially I'm like 100% cash flow only. And still I lean towards cash flow. If I had to pick between the two, I'm going to choose cash flow all day
sure.
because I think a good example of that is like, I don't really care if any of my properties ever get paid off. Let's say they're on a 30-year term. Once we get close to 30 years and they're almost paid down, like I'll probably refi them into another 30-year term, or at that point, we'll
Yeah,
probably have, 60-year loans at that point. But just because I don't care necessarily what the equity is on the property, I'm investing for the freedom that comes from the cash flow. So I think cash flow brings freedom because it's consistent, even in a downturn. Like usually cash flow stays fairly consistent. Like I said, I love the freedom aspect of
yeah,
it. To me, like having $1 million in the bank versus having $10,000 a month that comes in every single month, I choose a 10 grand all day, right? That's more freedom because I know the $1 million eventually is going to disappear and I'm limited with what I can
hmm,
do with it. And so I think that kind of answers the question there. But I will say, the most wealth, I wouldn't say necessarily freedom or anything like that, but the most wealth is built from the equity side of things. And you
ownership.
start seeing that, yeah, ownership, but then you just start to see that with, you know, a lot of people that are extremely wealthy right now. And I'm talking extremely wealthy. Most of it doesn't come because they've, collected cash flow every single month and saved up that cash flow. It comes because they're buying these expensive assets that appreciate and build equity.
I would agree wholeheartedly, and the process behind that, might I add, would be that they take both the equity and the cash flow and they continue to reinvest it for more equity or more cash flow, whatever they're investing for. Because again, that, like you talked about, the properties that you own, you'll just refinance. What are you going to, like, when you refinance those properties, what are you going to do with the refinance? You're not just going to put that money in the bank, are you?
Right.
You're
No,
gonna
no.
reinvest that, like, yeah, like asking you specifically, what would you and Andrea do with that money when you refinance?
Yeah, every time you roll it into something that's gonna pay you, you know?
Yeah,
Um, I won't say this person's name, but I'm giving like a super hard time because they 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 just sold like their rental property. It's cash flow them $1,000 a month because it's super attractive because they can cash out and make 75 grand right now. And I'm just like, dude, I promise you this is gonna go down as probably one of your top 3 biggest regrets. Like, I'm
biggest
sorry, but
regrets.
it is.
Yeah,
Because you're killing your golden goose is essentially what you're doing, and this is, like, to your point, I was like, if you have a different asset that you're gonna go and take that 75 grand and go roll that into, and you can justify it to me that it's gonna be bigger, better, safer, whatever, like, or you just roll it into something, then that fine, like, I'll let it slide, but why are you selling it? Well, because I need some more money. Well, what are you gonna do with that money? Well, I'm gonna live, I'm just like, dude, that is the biggest step backwards. It's
yeah,
kind of trading that like that momentary joy, I guess, or momentary pleasure is probably a better word of like, oh, I got all this money, I feel good, I can do this, do that, versus that really long-term joy that comes from like being patient and doing the hard thing. The easy thing is to cash out and live pretty for 2 years. The hard thing is like, no, I'm gonna be disciplined
suffer
and
through it.
yes, 100%.
I don't hate me. We did sell real estate in 2022, uh, and I reinvested it back into our business that we have, a couple businesses that we have. So don't hate me. I did do that, but that
Not
I
friends
I,
anymore,
I
dude.
I'd
Not friends
I'd be
anymore.
happy to walk you. I'd be happy to walk you through the numbers because I feel like it was justified.
Oh,
But
bro,
that I
100%, and that's the difference, like, if you can and, most people's regrets, like, are selling properties. You ask them like, "Oh, I wish I
yeah,
would have never sold that. I wish I would never sold that." And I think it's interesting, right? And I also think another interesting thing is people that probably the average person, the biggest check they'll ever get in their life comes from investing in real estate on
S-
accident.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, man, imagine if you would have done that on purpose, what you could have turned that into. But I think that, like, I look back at the properties that I've sold, and, like, the other day, one came up for sale. I owned it probably 5 years ago. Maybe no, it's probably 4 years ago, and I bought it for 119, and I put 10 grand into it and sold it for 189, right? And I'm like, "Okay, cool, easy 50 grand." And the reason I sold that was because I rolled it into something else that anyhow ended up being way better. But I was talking to someone the other day, and that same property I think just sold for like 375. And obviously things have been wild the last little bit.
Yeah.
And I thought I sold it at a high price when I sold it. That's just one of the reasons I was
Yeah.
willing to sell it. And so he asked me, he was like, "Hey, do you like really, really regret that? I bet that was one of the dumbest things you've done." And I'm like, "Actually, no, not at all, because let me show you the property I got because of that. And I wouldn't have been able to
Yeah.
get this property at the time if I didn't sell this." And so I think it's all about, it's easy to go back and, hindsight's 2020, but
Sure.
you're trading assets for assets, that's different. Just never trade an asset for a liability.
Okay, that's a good one. That that kind of leads me to a thought from a quote that I heard earlier this week, and it was talking about the differences between the poor, the middle, and the upper class, and how they view money. In fact, I had a conversation with my mother last night about it. The poor view money as a way for them to pay their bills,
Mm,
and the middle class view money as a way for them to borrow more money to buy things, not necessarily assets, just things, right? However, the upper class or the rich people view money as a way for that money to make more money. And I think that's kind of, again, talking about this progression in your own real estate journey. That's kind of how that progression has happened is, you kind of bypass the poor, but you were right to the middle class of like, okay, I'm going to utilize this money to go and leverage other people's money to acquire more debt for, in your case, assets, right? But now you're very much at a point where it's like, okay, here's the money that I'm making. How can I leverage this money, or how can I put this money to work to make more of it? And I look up to you and Andrea in this sense because I feel like you guys do a fantastic job and you're great examples of being able to do that, and so I
awesome.
commend you for that. On that same note, you talked a little bit about previously in some of the properties that you guys have owned where you've done live-in work in properties you've purchased, and you've kind of, I've seen the backstory behind this, but was Andrea always on board with your real estate journey? Did you have to kind of gear her up for what you guys are doing, or was she always on board with that?
Yeah, great question. And this is one that comes up a lot, just the dynamics of investing and finances. And there's a reason that the number one cause of divorce is finance related, right? And so it's just so important to be on the same page with it. But it's interesting because initially, early on, like, the first house that I bought, I was single at the time, and then we got married, and we even had the choice, like, hey, we could live in this, 6-bedroom house. We own our own house, like, we should live here. It's a nice backyard and it's great. And like, it was
Yeah.
tempting for a minute, but then you look at the numbers, you're like, oh, I have, this much cash flow from college students. Like, we're gonna go rent for a little bit. And we did that until we bought, a duplex. And anyhow, to answer your question, like, no, she wasn't always on board, especially with buying real estate just in general. It's so funny because we talk about this every once in a while, but you grow up and a lot of it's like how you're raised, right? Like, when I went to go buy my
Yeah.
second property, my dad asked me, I was all excited. I told him, like, "Hey, I'm gonna buy this property, have it under contract." And he's like, "Well, did you pay your first one off?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't pay my first one off." Like, "Well, you should pay off your first house before you go buy your second house." And,
Yeah.
luckily, like, I had been diving into enough real estate content and, like, reading books and enough to know, like, "Hey, this is the person I would trade places with in this real estate space, and they're saying don't do this." And so I'm gonna go off of their advice. But it's really hard, right? Because
Yeah.
my dad's the one that, he knows everything. He's the one that's,
Yeah.
raised me. Like, you look up to them in so many ways for just life advice. And the same thing with my wife, right? Even when, like, I'm 1 semester short of my finance degree, 1 semester, and I still get all these emails saying like, "Hey, you can just finish this online really quick," and at this point, just kind of like prove a point. But it was that same thing. Like her parents thought I was crazy, my parents thought I was crazy, but we both felt really good about me just like stopping school and focusing more at the time on the door to door sales stuff. And huge blessing, looking back. And I'll probably never ever go back and just finish my degree more out of spite now. But kind of that same concept, like everyone looks at you like you're crazy. And my
Yeah.
wife, like, hey, we're getting into real estate, we should buy this property. And it's like, wait, hold on, hold up. You're not supposed to do that. That's debt. Debt's bad. Isn't debt a bad thing? We're taking on debt. Kind of like you said, right? Like the
Yeah.
the poor, the middle class, and you look at it as like, oh, you got to stay away from that. That's a bad thing. And that's probably more on the poor side, like you're saying, like don't even touch debt. Don't even touch debt. And then the
Yeah.
middle class, they're leveraging debt for the wrong things. But once, like, I explained to her and I showed her the numbers of, like, "This is what it is, this is how it works, this is how we're gonna do it," and honestly, like, probably a lot of trust on her part of, like, "Hey, Brody has been learning about this stuff, he knows what he's doing, I think," and eventually just taking that leap, and now it's funny now because she's so on board with it, just in general, and obviously she runs her own business now, which is another
Yeah.
thing. She was never entrepreneur minded. Like it would drive her nuts every time I would play like a self development book or business book on a drive, like an audiobook. She's like, turn this crap off. And so it's been cool to kind of like see the transition and she's all in on it. And like we'll buy properties that none of us will even look at. A lot of times like, "Hey, put an offer on this." She's like, "Okay, we'll talk about it for a second. Like, you feel good about it? Cool. I feel good about it. Awesome." And that's kind of the extent of it. Whereas early on, it was like a big deal. So we've come a long ways.
She's this is so funny though because every time we hang out or do something together, she's still to the point now where it's like you can't talk about business in a business light, and if it is not fun for her, she won't do it. That's I think,
Yeah.
and I wish I had more of that. I wish I embodied a little bit more of that because sometimes I suffer through the suck, and I'm like, why am I doing this? This isn't fun right now. But that's it's kind of fun to see the dynamic of you two.
Yeah, it's funny. Like last night, we have like a this swing at our house, and we're sitting on the swing, and it's I don't know 10:30 or something, and I started talking about just something to do with business, and she's like, "Why do you always do this right before we go to bed? Like you always do this." Or we laying in bed, and I'll say something and she's like, "That's just gonna stress me out. Like don't talk about that right now." And I'm like, "This is the fun stuff." So yeah, you're
Uh,
exactly right. She's like, "Turn it on, turn it off." And she's good at
yeah.
that.
Oh, good. No, that's funny. Um, Tell me what I mean. Obviously, we talk about investing into real estate, and you had some great, like you have some great mentors, some individuals that I know that I've communicated with or that I've kind of seen in the background. I know Dave Allred's one for you, and Dave Allred one runs a syndication that I don't know how much money they're managing now, but it's tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in assets. But why, why did you, why did you want to start coaching other people on how to invest into real estate rather than just spend your time investing into real estate?
Yeah, really good question because I would probably make a lot more money if I only focused on real estate and raising money and like I know I could do
Right.
really
Well, that's why I ask it. Like I feel like you've lost out on a little bit by taking time out of your schedule to coach other people, but that's why I'm curious about it.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Um yeah, I think that dude, I just enjoy it more. For me it's like building a business. It's fun like seeing people change their lives. Just like one deal can change someone's life. And like I forget how much $500, $1,000 a month extra like early on that made the biggest difference. It was like
Yeah.
everything, right? And I think sometimes I just forget that. And so it's really cool to be around people where you help them do something like that. And it's like, dude, you've changed my life, like you've set me
Monumental.
on this path. And so that's really rewarding. I love investing in real estate. I always will do it. I still do it. Just more get to use the creativity side of my brain. I love like building and creating something and turning it into reality. But I have more fun with the school and with the business building stuff. It's just more exciting for me. It's more fulfilling for me. And yeah, so that's probably why I spend the most time doing that and have chosen to do that.
I think that's a good answer because again, like we talked about earlier, if it's not fulfilling for you or if it's not fun for you, uh, what's the point? You know,
Yeah.
why are you doing it if it's not fulfilling for you? Walk me through I know, but walk the listeners through the process of the real estate investing school. You got a couple different coaches. All those coaches have really unique niche knowledge about real estate into different asset classes and different ways to invest into real estate. But walk through someone through about what that would look like investing into the real estate school and why people should do that. I'm telling you, you should do that if you're interested in investing into real estate. But I mean, we've got your time, so let's kind of dive into that. What does that look like?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. The reason that I want to create a school in the first place was you're best positioned to serve who you once were. And I feel like for me, when I was trying to figure out this whole thing of like I said, for real estate, I kind of figured out by accident, like, oh, there's money involved in this, and this is actually passive, and this is really cool. And this is replacing my active job where at first I was working at Gold's Gym, and that was like a lot of hours in the week, and I didn't love it. And so I'm like, man, this passive stuff gives me more time to do what I love. And so once I kind of went down that path, it was like just devouring any content I could get a hold of, podcasts, books, YouTube, whatever. And it was a good way to learn, but it just took so much time. And the biggest thing that I learned was like, I was taking in so much content, I didn't really know what was right for me in my situation and what wasn't, right? Because there's so much content out there, it's hard to decipher through what actually applies to you in your situation versus applies to somebody else in their situation. And there's so many strategies, but some of them just frankly like work better at different times in our lives, depending on the
Right.
situation we're in. And so for me, it was a lot of like time, one, learning everything, and then two, money, because I would do things the wrong way and have to learn that hard lesson and realize, like, okay, I wish somebody was a few steps ahead of me looking back, being like, hey, I'm where you want to go. This is what I would have done instead, or this is what you should work towards. And so, really decided to build that. And so that's what real estate investing school is. Like, we give people the education, but then we also give them the accountability. We give them all the tools. We give them the motivation, so they actually have a step-by-step formula. And, early on you mentioned like suggesting people, go get a HELOC or do a cash out refinance to get started. And those are all of the things we look at first. We look at the person, what they have to work with, what their skills are, if they have cash, if they don't have cash, if they have, strategic partnerships, who they can borrow money from, if they needed to go borrow money, right? If they have equity in the house, all of these things where we exhaust all the options on what they have to work with. And then we look at where they want to go, because that's the other thing. Everybody has different goals with real estate. It's one thing if you want to be an active job, right? You're going to take a different
Yeah.
path than if you just want to create passive income. And so once we know, okay, here's your goal, here's where you want to end up in 3 to 5 years, all we do is just fill in the steps, and it's really easy from that point, because looking back, somebody like a coach that's been there and is doing it and is a master at it, they can easily be like, "Okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, let's do everything we can to focus on getting to step 1 right now." And so in a nutshell, that's what we do. It's a combination of one-on-one coaching, group coaching, awesome guest speakers, and really just giving everybody the tools and all of the trainings necessary to go build more freedom in their life.
It's been fun for me to kind of sit on the sidelines and watch everything as you've built real estate investing school and give consultations to a lot of the members of real estate investing school because I've seen people who have started in the program who have never invested into real estate or they have no base knowledge of real estate or how to invest in real estate, and then to get their first deal or their second deal, and then like on my end of things have conversations with them about taxes, and then it's kind of fun to see the light bulb go off because that's really what happens with a lot of your students is they see this light bulb go off and then they understand, wow, here's the potential for this. And again, like we said, the momentum that you can carry even with just one property is immense, and for some of those students it's really fun for me to watch, and I know you have those experiences as well dealing with some of the people in the school.
Dude, 100%. Yeah, and you add so much value to the program too. Like, and that's the whole goal is like if someone's going along the
Yeah.
path and they're on their own and let's say they run into a speed bump, it's really easy to view that speed bump as a roadblock and it's like the sky is falling. I was trying to do this and my
Yeah.
lender told me no, or like I got denied because of my taxes because of this. And it's like, cool, well, let's do this. Go book a call with Brady and like talk it
Yeah.
all out. And they're able to get through it. And then they're right back on pace, right back on the path. They didn't have to stop, turn around, or just quit.
Well, I think it goes to say that, and this goes for everyone. I think even both you and I, well, I know for me for a fact it does, but like when you don't know, it adds a level of fear that you've probably never experienced before. And whatever you don't know, I mean, it could be anything from how lending works to how title works to how am I going to qualify to how am I going to raise capital, and that unknown typically adds an element of fear. But I think what happens, and this is a great example with real estate investing school, is once an individual understands how it works or they receive that education or that knowledge provides the light for them to then be able to have confidence in what they're doing. And I think that is so very important. Again, whether you're building a business or you're starting a new job or you're trying to get educated on a subject matter or you're trying to buy your first property, that knowledge or that knowledge base that you can find from a group is invaluable.
Yeah, man, 100%. I almost think of it like surfing. I've been trying to pick up surfing more and more since moving out here. And like a lot of the best waves are in the evenings as the sun's going down. And so you're out there and sometimes it's like you're like waiting for the last wave and every once in a while I'll be the last one out on the water and it's like scary, right? Because
Yeah.
it's kind of dark and then you start thinking about sharks and you're like sharks feed at night and then you're like what's gonna happen? I'm the only one out here, and what if it eats me? And I whatever, right? Like you just start psyching yourself out. It sounds funny now, but then when you're in this open water ocean and it's like pretty dark and you're the only one out there, it's sketchy. But I think about that, and whereas I'm like, okay, but when you're catching the last wave with all of your friends and they've been surfing for years, they know the waters, they're not scared. Like you don't even think about it, right? You don't even
Yeah.
think about it. It's pitch dark. Like it doesn't matter because you're around people who have done it before, who are currently doing it. They get it, they understand it. Like you have a support system to lean on and you don't even get scared. Like the fear is not even there at all. And so I think it's like the same thing with real estate. If you're around people that have never done it before, you're in a new environment, you're by yourself. Yeah, it's going to be scary 100%. And so for me, I think like one, you don't know what you don't know. And there's a lot of stuff I don't know, but one of the things is just being willing to admit that and, realizing that, like, I hired a new employee, last week, and my wife was talking to him like, "Hey, I'm so sorry you have to work with Brody." And I'm like, "Yeah, I already told her I'm sorry she has to work with me because I know all my faults, right? Like, I know all these things,
Yeah.
like, I can be scatterbrained, I can just, like, I know
Yeah.
a ton of things, and I'm like, "That's also why I hired you because you 'cause you're gonna help me with all of this." But the point being is, like, I was like, "I'm okay to admit that, like, I'm fine admitting that where
Yeah.
I need help, and that's why I hired you is so you can help fill those voids." And so it's not so much hey, hide your weaknesses or all of us don't know how to invest in real estate. But it's like if it's holding you back from getting you where you want to go, you need to put a system in place. And if you're swimming by yourself or surfing by yourself and it's dark and it's scary and you don't have the right people around you, like go put yourself into a system. And it's not just with real estate investing, it's with fitness, it's with anything in life, in business. Like there's a reason you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. And it's not just because you hang out with them. It's because of everything that they do. You just start doing. You don't view it as big of a deal.
I mean, we can put this in as the next shameless plug, but I also feel like that's the exact reason why you and Mitch Matthews started the Young Entrepreneurs Club.
Mm.
There's a lot of people in that group who I know also resonate or are a part of the real estate investing school as well, who kind of have jumped ship into the Young Entrepreneurs Club. But what a great tool! It's a free group for younger individuals or newer entrepreneurs to be around others who have or are building successful businesses or have the knowledge base to help you in certain circumstances. Whether that's with marketing or with your health or with your family relationships or with your whatever. And I again another thank you for that because it's a great group and I think a lot of people need that.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, 100% I appreciate it. And like I said, it's just like, what are the things that I wish I would have had? And even to this day, and how do you go create that for other people? And I think that when I look back, at my life so far, the the people that have made the biggest impact on my life are the ones that have changed the way that I thought about things and what I
Mm,
thought was possible. And I've really been leaning into this like dreaming bigger, faster, concept lately. And I just think I think like at the end of the day, at the end of my life, whatever it is, if someone can say like, oh yeah, because of that person, I actually was able to think bigger than I initially thought possible. And my 10 or 20-year goal was now my goal for next year. And I went and accomplished that. And I just bought myself 20 years of quality of life. Like I want to have that influence and that impact on people. And I think it just comes back to, yeah, that's, why you see, yeah, that's real estate investing school is just proving people, even people listening. It's like, I think it's so easy to look around at what most people are doing and the path that most people are on, and we just assume that that's the path that we have to go on or we need to go on in order to live life. And I would just challenge that being like, no, if you want to retire next year, you can retire next year if you want. That's one of the things that's been so empowering about moving to Hawaii. This is like something I wrote down 5 years ago. Like, I want to own a beach house and I want to live there part of the year. And it's like, it's just so fulfilling knowing that life is ours to go and like design and create however we want to. And sometimes I think people just need permission to know, like, hey, you can go do that. You don't have to wait around for the pension. You don't have to wait around for,
yeah.
the jackpot. Go create your own jackpot. Go create your own lottery.
Okay, so we're like, this is one thing that I wanted to cover, and you made it very easy for me to cover it. One of your biggest mantras, or like your motto, is "Dream it, write it, build it."
Mm.
It kind of goes along with the build it bigger, faster kind of mentality that you just talked about. I don't necessarily want to get into why that's your motto or what you do, but I do want to get into what you are currently dreaming, what you are currently writing, and what you're currently trying to build. Like how are you applying your own motto into what you guys are doing right now, you and Andrea, or just you personally?
Yeah, cool question, man. Yeah, it takes a lot of insight to ask ask a question like that, and it also puts me on the spot. Earlier I was talking about how you kind of get to a point where no doubt, like I've been super blessed in my life so far, and like I said, no doubt that I have a long ways to go. But we've
Yeah,
gotten to a point where it's like when you have so much time freedom and more financial freedom than most people, and you get to make different decisions, and it almost puts more pressure on you, and pressure is a privilege. But it's like now I have to decide what I actually want to go do with my time. And so a lot of it comes back and you're almost looking at yourself in the mirror like, okay, like do I want to go all in on this real estate investing school stuff? Do I need to go pivot and go create $100 million fund? Do I pivot and go do something completely different? Do I sell this company? So you start to have all these options, which is kind of fun because it puts you in a spot where you actually have to think deep and you're not doing things
yeah,
based on what you have to do, but you're doing them based on like, oh, what's going to like allow me to grow the most. Right. And that's one thing I would say is like, it's easy to take your foot off the gas and especially start to do things that put you in comfortable situations. And you and I both
yeah,
know anytime you start living life by comfort, it's just not a recipe for success. And so a lot of my life recently has been like, okay, how do I stop, even though I can live comfortably, like live uncomfortably by choice? And, so I took like a break from, doing like a lot of these ultra marathons and bigger races and even like a lot of the ice bath stuff and just these things that I'm like, I don't really have to do this. And so big on my list now is, one, like fitness. I've always been like a 6 time a week, gym goer and like the guy that like, okay, you have a shirt on, like, yeah, he goes to the gym. But I'm like, there's a whole other level that I haven't unlocked there that I know I need to. And so that's been one of the things which sounds interesting, but like that's like my focus where I'm like, I just want it to be, I think it's easy in other aspects of my life to look from the outside and be like, okay, he's got it figured out here, 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 here. But I want it to be where like my fitness level, it's like oh yeah, there's no doubt he also has it figured out here. And right now I don't feel like it's really there. So that's one thing.
Okay.
And then I launched a mastermind group this year, which has been
Oh,
super fun for me. It was interesting because I initially we had a lot of students in real estate investing in school that were asking for like a higher level mastermind group, and so I'm like, okay, yeah, let's just create one. The demand's there. People will pay for it. We'll do a few meetups throughout the year, and started doing that, and it was just like, dude, something with it like feels off. Like it wasn't charging my battery. It was more like turned into a thing where I'm showing up and I'm teaching these classes, right? Where I want it to be like a legit mastermind where I'm around people that level me up. We all level up
right.
together. We're growing as like husbands and fathers, and we have a couple females in the group, so like as mothers as well, right? But just becoming better people, better business owners. And so I launched that, and that's been super fun for me. And it's funny because that's the name of it, is like Dreaming Bigger Faster Mastermind. And so that's like
Yeah.
what we focus on. And I would say that's like been really fun and really exciting because it's taking like a lot of these things. It's not just only real estate or only money. And in fact, we had our first meetup a couple months ago, and my biggest takeaway, I thought I was going to come home with like all these like big goals, like go crush this and sell this for this and whatever, right? And I just came back, I'm like, dude, I'm so excited to be more present and to just get more quality out of my life. And so I'd say like that's kind of been like my biggest focus recently, is like, how do I not have so much going on, but how do I stabilize what I do have and get the most out of it? And you've probably heard the story of the fisherman. Have you heard that? You know what I'm talking about when I say that?
Which one?
Lots of fishermen out there. Um, basically, I'm gonna totally butcher it, but basically, there's this guy fishing in this third world country on this island, I guess, and somebody else is there on vacation, this businessman, and he goes up to him and he's like, "Hey man, you know what you should do is get two fishing poles. You can catch twice as many fish." And the guy fishing is like, "Okay, well, why would I do that?" Well, he's like, "Well, if you catch twice as many fish, you can sell some of them, you can make some more money." He's like, "Okay, well then what would I do with my money?" He's like, "Well, then you could buy, a fleet of ships, and then you could have these boats out fishing for you. You get even more, you make even more money." He's like, "Why'd I do that?" "Well, then eventually you can, make so much money that you can retire and you can come fish by yourself on an island." And he's like, "Okay, so what I'm doing right now, right?" And so I just think thinking back on that story, it just made me think like, okay, I have so many blessings in my life right now. Am I maximizing them? Am I pulling as much as I can out of it? And it sounds silly, but that's 100% probably like the biggest thing I'm focused on. And it doesn't sound like this big grandiose, go big, go big, go big. But for me, it is going big because it's maximizing quality and not just quantity. But it's like, hey, how do I like fully like love every minute of the day and all the things that I'm doing, even the hard things? Like, how do I just learn to embrace it and love it because it's setting me up for, the future? And so that gets me out of bed right now. That gets me really excited.
That's I don't it's you talk about kind of the whole entrepreneurship journey, and yeah, sometimes you do embrace the suck. Sometimes there are long days, sometimes there are hard decisions, but again, I think kind of the overarching conversation that we've had is if you enjoy it, go do it, and you will enjoy the hard conversations or the hard decisions, and you'll enjoy the suck, if you will. And
Yeah.
again, it's kind of fun, to see that and look at other people like yourself, or who are in similar situations, because again, you can see that you enjoy it. And
Yeah.
I enjoy what I do, and it makes life, it makes business, it makes the decisions so much more fun, and so much easier. So that no, I wasn't sure what I was going to get out of that question, but I couldn't have expected anything better. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of our friends and stuff, like they dread work, and my wife and I
Yeah.
we love work. Like we love going to work. We love our time off, but we love our time on. We love like hanging out with our family and like with the kids, but like we love to go work because it's like every day you get to go build something and it's kind of like a game and it's fun. And I just can't imagine, we spend so many hours of the day, working. Most people it's 9 to 5. And if you don't love that and enjoy that, man, it just doesn't sound that fun. And I think it's important to realize that, like I said, everybody can go build that. Everybody can go build that. And I think it's
Yeah.
it's easy for someone to listen to a podcast like this and based on our conversations, they're like, "Oh, cool. Well, they got lucky or that worked out for them or,
Yeah.
things kind of work together and that's cool. They love what they're doing, but I'm not there yet and I don't love what I'm doing." Like, dude, I just have it's been intentional, right? It's been an intentional thing. Building it still is intentional now, and we can get into this another time. But like my house in Hawaii, like I bought it with no money. Like I'm
Yeah.
doing a cash out refinance on right now, and I'm gonna pull out $300,000 off of it. And so it's like the reason I just am so passionate about this stuff. It's not bragging or anything like that, right? It's just saying that like
Sure.
there is a path, and this is like there's a way to do it, and it's not luck, it's proven, and you just learn how to do it and put in the work
Yeah.
and the time, and you can go do it, and you can go build it, you can go quit your job, you can go start another company, like, there is a path, I promise, and so it's not just works for some people and doesn't work for other people type thing.
Yeah, people say knowledge is power, but I would add to it that knowledge is great, but the execution on that knowledge is what makes it powerful. And
Mm.
I would also agree with you. I think if someone in this position doesn't love their 9 to 5, make sure you just don't go try and get lucky. Make sure you find something that you're passionate about because I promise you, you will work longer than a 9 to 5. I guarantee it, right? And I would bet money on that. But I do want to I'm grateful for your time, Brody. Grateful for the insights. Always grateful for the conversation. Grateful for the friendship. Thanks for hopping on Slacking Off. I appreciate it today.
Dude, thanks for having me, man. Super fun. Excited for this
Uh,
podcast.
Absolutely. For those listening, again, thanks for listening to Slacking Off, where we do, well, for an hour we've slacked off, but for the most part, we do everything but slack off. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.